The arrangement that I'm going to show you now is our underwater arrangement, and it's probably the trickiest of the arrangements because it takes a lot of manipulation. But it's just interesting to put it together and see what you can do with this. I have two different containers here. I'm going to show you using this container and several of them. You can put tulips in there. So it's tulip season, and you can fill this with tulips. Here's some tulips that are coming up out of the vase, and so part of it is underwater, but some of it is above water, and it's just an exciting thing to do. Lots of the stores have tulips right now as spring comes in. The one I'm going to show you is similar to this. I'm going to use my larger container because I bought this orchid plant and I wanted to size it up for which it was going to fit best in, and it does not fit in the smaller container. And how I determined that was just sticking it up in there to see what was going to work, and that would be overpowering. And so this larger container is going to be what I want. And it has a little floating candle. Walmart has these wonderful floating candles. You can buy a whole packet of them. I think they're, I don't know, $6 maybe. But they're fun. You can use them in lots of different ways. So what we're going to do is try to do this arrangement. With this, since this is my container, and I've got these delicate flowers and all this water, I have to have some way to anchor them down. And so I went to the hardware store and got some washers. And my mechanics, my flowers that I'm going to use, and I found this on Pinterest, so you can look it up, is how to anchor your flowers onto these washers, because this is the weight you're going to have to hold it down into the bottom. So this was really interesting to see this, and it just shows you how to bundle them up with your wire. You can do the same thing with leaves, manipulate your leaves, wire them up, anchor them with those washers, and then we'll finish it off. So after you have your flowers in there and they're anchored down, and you certainly don't want anyone looking at those washers that are in there, and they do tend to rust eventually, you want to cover them somehow. And so I found these fun little glass blobs, and they look real pretty in the bottom. They reflect the light. They're going to cover up your washers and the mechanics of it and give you something else to look at. Dollar Tree. This white gravel is also a good medium to put in the bottom of it. So it's just covering the mechanics, but giving you something else, a different texture to look at. So we're going to start out. I need my wire. And you want to make sure that you cut a good length of wire. Don't want to run out of it. And then you need your flowers, of course. So I am going to take this orchid that I got. I'm not good at growing orchids, and so I thought, well, this will be fine. I'll cut off the blooms of what I need, and then Dusty's going to inherit this orchid.
It will be happy.
And it will be happy in her house. Now the orchids, when you get them, they're hooked to these little sticks, and I really like that because it's just one more way to keep the flower upright the way you want it. And it has little twisty wires, or some of them have the tiny little hair clips that clip on. And then you also have some wonderful leaves to work with. So what I'm going to do now is cut the stick. I can. And cut the stem, the orchid. So now I have something to work with. And what I'll do, since that curve is there, I'll just snip that off. And I'll make sure that that's wired on there. Another little piece of wire. So now when I'm ready to use it, I got a nice upright there. And then you want to test it to see where it's going to end up in your container. That's fun because some of it's going to be underwater and some of it's going to be above. If you want it completely submerged, then you can just work this up and snip off more of it. So it goes down a little bit more. And I like that. That's a nice look to it. And then I'll put some greenery in there to help it out. So now I want to make sure it's weighted down. So I'm going to take a couple of the weights. And as the directions showed, you just kind of, you're going to wrap it through the washer and around the stem and do it in a way that it's going to be flat for you. And it's got a nice hole in there so I can put those in there, wrap my wire through the washer and around the stem. This particular arrangement is going to take a little bit, maybe more time to make just because of the mechanics of it. You just have to make sure that everything is going to hold on the way you want it. It's kind of like sewing on a button. Put one more loop in there. Okay, so now I'm wired up and I'm ready to put my stem in there. And then I'm going to start wrapping that around. And I want it to be upright. May have to go in several different directions to get it to do what you want. And again, you cut it extra long, so if you need to loop it another direction, you still have lots of wire to do that. It's a little frustrating at times when it just doesn't want to do what you want it to do, but it'll be well worth it when you're done. Don't worry about that. And remember that your gravel that you put in there, your stones, are also going to help hold it up. So I have it wired. I want to see where I'm going to place it. That looks good. See how it's just kind of doing its own little thing in there. It's leaning forward. I can try to manipulate it a little bit more so it's leaning back. This is a perfect time for skewers because your hand doesn't always fit down in there. I found these great skewers that are pointed on one end and a flat paddle on the other. And so it's good for pushing things the way you want it to be when you can't get your hand down there, and especially when you're going to put your gravel in there, because then you can move the gravel around where you want it. So let's do a leaf. I love the shape of orchid leaves. They're just very gentle and soothing. Again, you want the wire. Poke a little hole through there so it's stick. And these are things that you're going to do ahead of time when you have lots of time to make your arrangement. So I've got the wire through there. And I could crisscross it back through those holes to make it a little sturdier. And then I grab my washers, put that in there where I want it, and start looping it around the washers. Again, this is, as I said earlier, it's an arrangement that's a little more time consuming, and it's more about the mechanics than putting it together and stepping back and say, oh, I like that, or I'll move that, and do this. This one is more time consuming, but it'll be worth it. Should have prepped some of these ahead of time, which I didn't do. You learn as you go along what to do and when to do it. So now I have my leaf that's attached to there, and I want it to be down in there to give a little natural look to the orchid. I'm just going to drop it down in there. And then I could do multiple leaves. I'm not going to take time to do more leaves than that, but you get the idea and you know what it is that you want to do. Because the orchids are white, I think I'm going to go with the white stones. And then just gently, I'm going to start with a base first. Take these out and put a layer down in there. So I have something for my washers to rest on. And then you can go back in and set your flowers in. It gives you more of an idea of where you want to place it. And with those stones in, because I have that stick in there, that's another way to try to anchor that. And then you just have to carefully go in and cover those washers with the stones. Make sure your container is nice and clean to start with, because if it has dust in it, it ends up showing. Or water spots. That's the hardest thing for me, to get rid of all the water spots there on it. And you'll have the idea of what it's gonna look like. And it looks like what you want. Again, use your little paddle, move the stones around. I see a wire sticking out, so I'm gonna stick that down under a stone. Move the stones where you want it. And you could use another couple of leaves in there that are a little bit taller to give you some more interest. Now here's the trick to an underwater flower arrangement. So for me, it's very simple. It's done. It's what I want. I just want to show off the beauty of those orchids, have some contrast in there with the green leaves and then the texture of the stones. And then you just get a gallon make sure you use the distilled water because it's going to stay clean for a long, long time. And then just carefully pour it in. If you do it a little slower, give it a break, some of the bubbles will go out, but they eventually go out. So this is going to keep your orchid going. Do we have any petals covered yet? You want to do it slowly so you don't damage the petals of your flowers. And at this time you can kind of stop and say, oh, is it doing what I want it to do? Is it showing the orchid or whatever flower you're putting in there, show it off to its best? I may move that back a little bit so it doesn't look like it's using the glass to stand up. And with time, after the water settles down, the air bubbles will go away also. But this is fun to do with tulips because they're such vibrant, beautiful colors. And especially if you have them under the water and then coming up out of the water, it's just pretty dramatic. And if you're looking for a little drama in your life, just make an underwater arrangement. And your flowers will float. That's why you want to make sure you have plenty of flowers in there. That's going to take this gallon. Leave a little head space in there. So some of these little orchids are going to show their little faces up and be looking at you and saying, whew, I like that. The bubbles will go away. And then use your floaters. Makes a really nice centerpiece for a dinner party or whatever you're gonna have. And if you're ever demonstrating anything, make sure that you've opened everything first and wired things first so you're not fiddling around and looking like, oh, crazy. And so, my little floating candle on there, put it on there, light it. You've got the mood, nice glass of white wine, and good seafood, and there you